Dan H411 Guitar Lessons. And today we're going to continue our little phrasing series and talk about pinch harmonics, or just harmonics in general. Just using harmonics to create some additional phrasing. So at the beginning there I did some pinch harmonics and things like that. And I'm going to tell you right now that one of the things about pinch harmonics is distortion, delay, and reverb, or three things, right? You need some effects on your rig to get some good pinch harmonics. And you don't have to have extremely high gain or anything like that, or lots and lots of delay or lots and lots of reverb, but it helps to have a little. Now, I don't have a whole lot going on right now. I actually don't have my pedal board hooked up right now. I'll turn my reverb up a little bit on my amp, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the gain up a little bit on my amp as well, and see if I can get a little bit more gain to get some better pinch harmonics here. That's a little better. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about how to get those, but we'll also talk about those kinds of things. And also, if I can get it to work, I may not be able to, but harmonics coming from amp feedback. You can hear it a little bit there. Let me turn the volume up just a little bit and see if we can go ahead and get some more of that going on. Right there is what I'm talking about. You hear it? Now, of course, in a band situation, when you got the gain up a lot higher, then you're going to get a lot more of that. And I'm actually going to throw a clip from when I was playing in Atlanta at a place called The Vinyl. I'm going to throw a clip in here where you're going to watch this clip and you're going to be like, wait a minute, what? And I'm not even going to explain the clip, but it's me at The Vinyl playing one of my Carvins, and I'm playing through a PV 5150 mini amp, one of the 5150 minis. And I want you to hear the amp feedback and how I got a really sweet harmonic. And the cool thing about amp harmonics, and I'll talk about those in just a little bit, the cool thing about amp harmonics is that they don't, what do you call it? They're not very predictable, right? You may or may not be able to get one purposefully, but if you can, that's great. But if you can't, then it might just happen out of nowhere. And then when it happens, you got to kind of hang on to it. And that's kind of what I did in this clip. So check out the clip. All right, so you're probably laughing right now because of what's going on there, but again, I'm not going to explain it. You just have to take my word for it that that was me. But what I want you to do right now is, if you do have a high gain amp, and I don't know if this works very well with digital amps or if it only works well with tube amps. I'm running through tubes. I'm running through the Laney Ironheart IRT60s, and I can get some pretty sweet tones out of these when they're cranked up a little bit, right? And what I do is I just kind of hang on a note, and it probably works better with the middle of the fretboard than it does higher up, or at least with like maybe the third and the fourth strings, maybe the second string. and not as much the first string, but it depends, again, on how your gain settings are and what effects you have running through your loop and what note you're playing and, you know, the atmosphere of the room. If you're in a band situation and you're playing really loud, it's going to probably ring out a lot quicker. And you do see a lot of artists get in front of the amp and do things like this. And that will create a feedback loop, but you don't always have to do that. The closer you are to the amp, the more it's probably going to feedback. But when you saw that clip of me on stage, I wasn't close to the amp at all. It still fed back, and that was because, again, the volume, you know, being turned up and the gain being turned up, and I probably had a reverb on and a delay on. So that's going to increase the amount of that kind of feedback and distortion. So before we get into the pinch harmonics and some other harmonics and things like that, let's go ahead and look at how we would get that amp feedback, which you may not consider that a harmonic, but I'm thinking it's kind of in the same category as something like this, right? It's kind of there. It's not quite the same, but it's kind of in the same category. So I might be playing something like this, and right there I get that note. Maybe that's the end of my solo, and I just let it go. Now I'm using a lot of vibrato there. Yeah, get a little closer to the amp. And you hear it a little bit, not a whole lot, but it's coming through. And again, it's just about finding that sweet spot and listening, because it will come through eventually if your settings are right. Probably not going to work as much on the higher strings. If I go to lower string, you can sort of hear it change. If you'll notice the way that I'm picking, I'm kind of slapping the string with my pick. And the reason I'm doing that is to kind of create a, you know, a punch on the note, which can then make it sizzle. And I don't know how else to explain that other than that's what it's doing, because you can hear the difference between this and this. You hear the difference? There's a little harmonic there. It's subtle, but it's a little bit there. And if you do that, and again, you got the gain brought up a little bit. I'm not doing anything special other than hitting the note a little bit harder than what I did the first time. Like I'm backing off on the vibrato, and then hitting it and coming back up. And you kind of hear us when it starts to die, the tone shifts from being a little bit low, and it kind of like goes negative. Like if you ever watch a movie and it goes from being a normal frame to then it turns to negative, there's like that twilight zone in between where it kind of shifts, and that's where that shift, you can hear that shift happening, right? You can hear that shift happening a little bit. So that's something I always found interesting, and I'm not sure what the science is behind that, but it definitely has something to do with the audio technology and the way that a speaker works and tubes work and an amp works and the guitar pickups work and the magnets and all that stuff. It's got something to do with that, but it's just about finding that zone and playing with that until you get that. Right there, you hear it? Like it's not going to start feeding back, but it definitely hit that spot where it wanted to start branching out. And if I had the amp louder, if I was in a different room with different acoustics, like maybe on a stage, then it would have definitely, you know, started going out. And that's different from an amp that is squilling, like a squilling type of feedback, a very bad sounding feedback. You'll get amps, especially a lot of solid state amps, that'll have that very bad squealy feedback, and you don't want something like that. Funny story, I was in a band before with a PV, what they called the trans tube amp. And I had that PV amp for a long time, and it was a great amp. It was solid state, but it was supposed to be based on a tube sound. And it sounded awesome, and I eventually tamed it and got it to sound really, really great and get it to stop squealing. But when I first had it, it squealed all the time. So every time I would turn the volume down and I would put my hands on the strings, it would just make a horrible noise. And I earned the nickname Squilly Dan. So if you ever heard the name of the band Stilly Dan, I became Squilly Dan for a little while. And I probably shouldn't tell that story because it's probably going to come back as stick, but that's kind of what happened. Squilly Dan, but I eventually tamed it, right? I got tired of the hazing and I said, okay, I got to figure out how to tame this amp. And I think I just played with the equalizer a little bit, right? The mids, the bass, the treble. Brought the treble down a little bit, maybe brought the mid a little bit up more, maybe brought the bass a little bit up more. However I did it, I was able to get that squill out and actually sounded really, really good. So it's a great amp. They don't make those anymore. You know, PB's basically moved more into making more high-end tube amps, but at the time, you know, they didn't have a whole lot of the lower-end, lower-cost tube amps at the time. I mean, if you wanted a tube amp, you were pretty much limited to buying something that was like $3,000. So I needed something cheap. I think it was probably, you know, $600, and it did the job. It was a 2x12. It wasn't extremely heavy. It was pretty light, and I had a little stand on it that kicked it back so that it aimed, you know, up a little bit. And it got great tone, and it worked well with my pedals that I was using, and it allowed me to gig, you know, at the time for about a year, and then eventually I sold it. But my point, of course, is that that kind of feedback is not the feedback you want. You want feedback that actually sounds harmonic, right? And it creates a pleasant sound to the ear, and it sounds like it's supposed to be in the song. And it may not even be in the key of the song, but it just has this universal key that fits over everything, no matter what you're playing over. And I think that's really interesting about harmonics. So let's talk about pinch harmonics. The difference between what I'm doing when I'm hitting the string hard and trying to get the amp to feedback versus a pinch harmonic is with a pinch harmonic, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pad of my thumb. And you've probably heard this before. I'm going to use the pad of my thumb to kind of lightly hit the string after I hit it with the pick. And it doesn't have to be hard. It's just you want to lightly hit it. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to hit a string, and then I'm going to tap that same string on the 12th fret. So I'm going to hit this third string here at the 7th fret, and I'm going to tap around the 12th or the 13th fret, somewhere around there. You hear how I'm getting a light harmonic? It's not a whole lot, and I'm not really good at that. You see these players sometimes when they're playing, and then they, you know, pop, 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 pop. Eddie Van Halen did a lot of that. And it's really neat to see people do that, and it's something I like to play around with. And there is actually a formula to that where you go up so many frets. But you can hear it just a little bit right there. There's a little bit different sound. A little bit different sound there. So you can hear it coming through just a little bit. I'm not great at it, and again, putting some effects on it, some delay, some reverb, things like that might make it ring out a little bit better, a little bit more profound. But it's the same kind of thing as using these harmonics, which you can find on, for instance, the actual fret, not in between the frets, but the actual fret on the 5th fret, the 7th fret, sometimes on the 9th fret of most of your strings. The 12th fret, Sanitarium by Metallica. You can find it there. And all I'm doing there is I'm just putting the pad of my finger on the string and just hitting the string. And you hear that in a lot of songs because it creates a unique tone. But what I want you to understand about that is that anytime you hit those strings, even if you're playing another note and then you hit the string with the pad of your finger, it's going to create that harmonic. So when you do it like this, it creates a harmonic. Okay, I played on the 5th fret of the 3rd string, tapped the 12th fret of the 3rd string, and I got the harmonic. So if you use the pad of your finger to tap, lightly tap, and create a harmonic note, then if you use the pad of your thumb to hit that string right after you hit it with the pick, it's going to create a harmonic note. And it's called a pick harmonic, and it's really a fake harmonic, but you're basically creating the same kind of thing. So if I play, for instance, the 5th fret of the 3rd string, and I hit the string with my thumb, the pad of my thumb, just really lightly, right after I hit it with the pick, you can hear that it creates a different tone. And if I bend the note and use vibrato on the note as I'm playing it, then what's going to happen is it's going to create a really aggressive sound. So what I'm doing there is I'm choking up on the pick, and I'm hitting the string. And right after I hit the string, I'm hitting it with the thumb, okay? Again, there's lots of videos on this. There's thousands of videos out there on YouTube on this. But it creates that harmonic sound. And you can go ahead and just go back and forth on a scale. Like, for instance, the E pentatonic scale at the 12th fret, where I'm playing on the 6th string, I'm playing 12, 15. And on the 5th, 4th, and 3rd strings, I'm playing 12, 14. And then on the 2nd and the 1st strings, 12, 15. And I can go ahead and play that 5th, 4th, and 3rd string at 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 14, and hit almost every single one of those notes with that pinch harmonic idea there. Use some vibrato as I'm playing, do some bends. So if you're playing a lead and that's all you're doing is using those 6 notes, and you look at the past 2 videos that I did on phrasing where I talked about bends and I talked about vibrato, then you can include all of that together. I tried to hit a little harmonic note there. But if you can find that note to hit, then you can come up with all kinds of cool stuff as well. You know, bam, 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 and all kinds of cool stuff. But anyway, you combine all that together, you got vibrato going on. You got, what do you call it, the bends, the dad bends. You got the pinch harmonics, like Dimebag Darrell used to do, or what's his name, Zach Wilde does. And then that allows you to play, again, with more phrasing, with, you know, more of those little tricks in your vocabulary. And if you play around with all that stuff and just use like those 6 or 7 notes, right, to kind of use that to kind of build up your phrasing, then any new scale that you learn, you can go ahead and add that to it. And that's kind of the idea, is just keep adding and adding and adding until you get to the point where you're playing exactly the way that you want to play. And when you hear something in a song, you go, oh, I know what they're doing there. They're doing a pinch harmonic. Or I know what they're doing there. They're doing a slip slide vibrato, right? Something like that. And you can hear it. You'll start to hear it. As a matter of fact, music will eventually get to the point where you start analyzing everything you listen to, because you're going to be like listening to it and saying to yourself, oh, I know what they're doing. Oh, I know what they're doing. Or I don't know what they're doing. I got to figure that out. And that's something that you'll do as well. Playing guitar, just like any activity, hobby, sport, you eventually get to the point where you watch the other people who are playing and you start to pay attention to what they're doing and thinking to yourself that, hey, that's really interesting. I got to figure out how they're doing that. And then you add it to what you're doing as well. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Eddie Van Halen, I remember seeing him in an interview talking about Randy Rhoads and said, he's a great player. I just wish he'd stop copying what I'm doing. And I would have never guessed that. Because to me, Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen had very unique ways of approaching the guitar. But Randy Rhoads did do a lot of tapping and stuff like that after Eddie Van Halen did a lot of that. So, I don't know. It's just interesting that there is only so much you can do on the guitar, even though it's a limited amount of availability, right? We only have so many frets, so many strings, so many notes that fit in the key of the song that we want to play. But we can come up with unlimited things, even though something may have come before that sounds similar, we can put a new twist on it, and it just keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going. There's nothing wrong with the old stuff that's tried and true. There's nothing wrong with coming up with new stuff and making it sound different. It's all rock and roll, right? So go ahead and take this and play with this, and now that you've got the vibrato lesson, the dad bend lesson, and the pinch harmonic lesson, put them together and ask me questions in the chat. I'll be more than happy to help you out. And don't forget, I do got a free course out there, foundational course. If you're watching this and you're like, I don't even know where to begin, then go get the foundational course. It's not going to teach you how to play the guitar, but if you already know how to play the guitar a little bit, you're an intermediate player, and you're playing your cowboy chords and things like that, and you want to know how to solo, then that 7-day course is over at tinyurl.com/DanH411, and it will teach you how to pick up the guitar and just go, okay? So learning the notes of each of the scales from 1 string to 2 strings to 3 strings, all the way across the fretboard, understanding how the scale shapes lock together like puzzle pieces, and unlocking the fretboard so you can pick up the guitar and play songs in any key, right? Play solos over the songs in any key and do it with ease and confidence and be able to improvise, which is, whenever I'm playing these shapes, that's what I'm doing. I'm just improvising. So if you want to improvise solos, that's how you do it. tinyurl.com/DanH411. You got any questions, let me know in the chat, and I'll see you in the next one.